Good evening, Jill here, and I'm here to continue the stories that you have been hearing about Elijah over the past few weeks. Now, I think you've been hearing about Elijah and some of the amazing things that God was able to do through Elijah. Now, Elijah was a prophet, and a prophet is somebody who is inspired by God to tell people and to teach people about God and about Jesus. And Elijah lived 900 years before Christ was even born, so a long, long way before Christ was born. Last week, I think you heard about a story of how Elijah came across a widow and her son and asked that they would share a meal with him. And the widow had to confess that all she had left was a little bit of oil and a little bit of bread, and that was all she had left. But God did a miracle through Elijah, and that cruse of oil and that bread just kept on going and kept on going and keeping him alive. And then I think you heard about the miracle of when the son died. Elijah, again, a miracle performed by God through Elijah, brought the son back to life. Amazing miracles that God did through Elijah. Next week, you're going to hear another amazing miracle that again, Dawn will be telling you a story about Elijah and another miracle he performed. Again, all these things happened because Elijah has a very close relationship with God. But you know, life wasn't always amazing for Elijah. Sometimes he was very afraid and sometimes he was very worried, just as we are too. Especially perhaps in this time of the pandemic that we've been through, a lot of people, adults and children, have been very concerned about the coronavirus. And it's right to be afraid, it's right to be scared, there's nothing wrong with that. And Elijah, this great man of God that we've been hearing about, this great man of God who was able to perform these miracles through God, he was afraid too. He had times when he was scared. And he had times when he was very frightened about what people would think about him, what people would say about him. And that made him scared. Do you know there are other people in the Bible who also were scared about what people would think? People I'm sure you've heard of. One is Noah. Do you remember Noah? He had worries too. The story of Noah is in the book of Genesis, and it tells how God asked Noah to build a massive ark, a massive boat. And when I say massive, I mean massive. The length of it was about the same as 1.5 football pitches. It was 4 stories high. It was huge. Now that in itself is a big task, but what was even more amazing was God asked Noah to build this ark in the middle of a desert. There'd been no rain for years and years and years. Can you imagine what people thought about Noah? Why is he building this massive boat when it hasn't rained for years? We're in the middle of a desert. But despite that, Noah knew that what God wanted was most important. So Genesis 6 tells us that Noah did everything that God asked him to do. Then there's Moses. I'm sure you've all heard of Moses. You may have heard a story that Moses was spoken to God through a burning bush. And God asked him to go and see Pharaoh and ask him to release his people from slavery. Now, Pharaoh was a king. It was the name for the king in ancient times. So Pharaoh was a very, very powerful man. How do you think you would feel if someone said to you, just pop over, see the queen, and just tell her what she should do? How scary would that be? That would be very scary. But that's what God asked Moses to do, go and see the Pharaoh. And scary though it was, Moses realised that if that's what God wanted, he would do it. And you know, there are heroes of faith even today. There are people today, living today, who have done amazing things because they believe that that's what God asked them to do. One such lady is somebody called Jackie Pullinger. Now, Jackie Pullinger went to a country called Hong Kong many, many years ago. And she went to share the love of Jesus to people in what's called the walled city, where there were gangsters, there were drug addicts, there was a lot of bad stuff going on. But Jackie Pullinger believed that God wanted her to go to this place and tell people about the love of Jesus. And so she went to Hong Kong. All she had was £10 in her pocket. She got on a boat, she went to Hong Kong, and she did some amazing things. She saved so many people's lives through Jesus, people whose lives have completely turned round. And she, Jackie Pullinger, is alive today. and she went around doing things that because she felt what God wanted to do. She was scared, she was frightened, she didn't know what people would say, but she went because God told her to. So what was Elijah afraid of? What was it that God asked Elijah to do that he was so afraid of? Well, there was a king called King Ahab, and the Bible tells us that King Ahab did more evil in the eyes of God than any other king. He was a right nasty piece of work, not a nice guy at all. He used to set up statues for false gods. He did a lot of bad stuff. Because of this, God sent Elijah to say to Ahab, because of what you've done, there's going to be no rain for several years. Imagine having to go and tell a king that. And you know what? That's what happened. There was no rain for many, many years. And several years later, God said to Elijah, now I want you to go back to King Ahab and I want you to tell him something different is going to happen. I want you to go and tell him that I want he and his wife and lots of prophets to meet me at a place called Mount Carmel. Now, Elijah was terrified because he knew King Ahab wanted to kill him. But once again, he knew what he had to do. He went and told King Ahab. He also knew that King Ahab would listen, and he went and told King Ahab what he wanted him to do. And you know what? And the most amazing thing happened on Mount Carmel. And next week, Dawn is going to tell you all about it. Don't miss it.